we will be talking about basically the structure of any state government, how it functions, the rules and regulations, and we will be talking about specifically about Bengal, obviously. You would have heard of the Battle of Polashi. In fact, the probation in Nadia would have seen Polashi or Plassey as it was called. And that was a turning point, as those of you who have studied history, and you had to study history for your civils. But it was really after the first so-called First War of Independence, that is 1857, that the formal powers actually went to the British government. And the civil service, in the Indian civil service also was set up under an act of 1861. Just after the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Independence. And as you know, at that stage, Indian civil service officers were recruited only from London. So you had to actually go to London to appear in that examination. In fact, 3 services were formed: the Imperial Indian ICS, the Provincial Civil Service, and PCS is in a state like UP and some other states, it's still called PCS. Most other states have, Rajasthan has Rajasthan Administrative Service or Orissa Administrative Service. Here it is West Bengal Civil Service, but I know in UP it's PCS. So the PCS came into existence, and you had subordinate services also. Now, if you look at the history of Indian civilians, as our predecessors were called in the British period, we have had quite a few illustrious, civilians. As many of you would know, the elder brother of Rabindranath Tagore was the first Indian to be in the ICS, and he didn't get his home cadre, in case all of you worry about that even today. So he landed up in the Bombay Presidency. Those days it was divided into presidencies. So he would have been a very influential because they were big zamindar families, but he didn't get any help at all, so he landed up in Bombay. Then, of course, Subhash Bose is a well-known example of a person who made it to the ICS, came fourth, but decided to give it up. You would perhaps not have heard, those of you who are not from Bengal, of Annoda Shankar Rai. Annoda Shankar Rai was a very famous Bengali essayist, novelist, poet, who was actually who had served in the ICS and then decided to give up. So he is a well-known figure. Then we come to this person, very interesting person, Sir William Herschel. Sir William Herschel was the first person to tell the world that fingerprints identify a person. So you can say biometrics origin started from here. One of the ICS officers, William Herschel. When I was Home Secretary, I had proposed that our fingerprints bureau, and now it will be expanded with the new act which is coming in, of biometrics. So I thought it's a good idea to name that unit after William Herschel. Then you have Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, you would have heard of course. We've all heard of Bankim Chandra, and he was also in the civil service, the provincial civil service. Guru Sada Datta. Those of you who have travelled in Kolkata, there is a very important road which is called Guru Sada Road. The Guru Sada Road is named after Guru Sada Datta. Now, my introduction has been mentioned that I was the DM, District Magistrate of Birbhum. Now, so was Guru Sada Datta, and I was able to actually ferret out his notes to successor. And I was very interested because I thought perhaps he'll mention something about what he had done, because what he had done was he had contributed to what is known as the Brahmachari movement, and wherein physical education, physical fitness, lathi khela as it was called, all that, and also had a major contribution in handicrafts and especially embroidery and other things. So he had a major contribution, but in his the notes to successor were very professionally written. He had simply talked about the district, the subdivisions, the issues, the police, this, that. So it had nothing really, he never wrote anything about what he need not have written. The last person I've mentioned here is because I knew him. Binoy Ranjan Sen was the Director General of FAO. Now if you look at the post-independence, I have not mentioned too many names here, but you would have, the first chief secretary after we became independent, the list which is there in the room I had once occupied, the first name there is Sukumar Sen, who was also the first chief election commissioner. And the first ever elections which took place in India, the entire design was his. Although in retrospect, you know, if you read the history of elections, that was the time each party has their own dabba. So you had to go and put your, the slip was blank. You had to put it in the dabba, the Congress dabba or some other party's dabba, CPI perhaps. Okay, so Ashok Mitra is again a person I have seen. He used to live in my locality, and he was the second Registrar General for the 61 census. And the third person is a very interesting gentleman called K.C. Shiva Ramakrishnan. I would say if there's one person who has actually contributed to the study of urban development in India post-independence, it's him. And he set up one of the first development authorities, the Calcutta Metropolitan Development Authority, in the late 60s. And then whatever has happened in many other states and other cities have really can be traced back to him, because he went on to become the Urban Development Secretary of the Union government subsequently. Now, if you look at the Constitution, obviously there are certain articles and parts which relate to issues relating to the way the states are set up. Basically, you have to look at Part 6 of the Constitution, which deals and which is Article 152 to 237, quite a wide range of articles. And where there is the Constitution itself talks about the Governor, the Council of Ministers, the Advocate General. Then I'll come back to this Article 166, which talks about conduct of government business. Then you have the state legislature, the high courts and the subordinate courts. Apart from that, of course, you have panchayats, municipalities, cooperative societies, scheduled and tribal areas. These are different parts of the Constitution. And you have an important part which is relations between union and states, legislative, administrative, property contracts, suits, services under the union and states. And here is where in part 4, the services, the All India services is mentioned. I mean, of late we seem to be getting this feeling that the Government of India is treating an All India service as if it's a central service, which it is not. It is an All India service, is a different concept altogether. So Article 312 and the State Public Service Commission, which is Article 315. Because each state has a Public Service Commission, and it is a constitutional body. It is not a statutory body, but is mentioned in the Constitution itself. And we are also privileged to be mentioned as a service in the Constitution itself. The Indian Administrative Service is part of our Constitution. We talk of Article 246 and the 3 lists as a legislative powers. That is, on this subject, the Parliament has legislative power, and on this, the concurrent list, both have powers, but if there is a difference between state and center, the central law will prevail, all that we know. But the most important thing in this slide, which you can take back, is Article 162, which says that the executive power of the state shall extend to the matters on respect to which the legislature of the state has the power to make laws, subject to and limited by the Constitution or any central laws. So it's very clear that the administrative powers are coterminous with the legislative powers. So 162 is often forgotten, and here the issue comes that the state list has 61 subjects. Now we all know how it starts and how it ends. Now, if you come to what public policies are, some of you would have studied public policy. Broadly, it is the executive and the cabinet which decides on public policy. Now, if that public policy can be carried out by changing or by having a new law, then they go to the legislature and the state legislature, the Vidhan Sabha, and the Vidhan Sabha has the power to pass a law. The law goes to the governor. Sometimes the governor refers it to the president in some certain cases. All that happens. Now, You have heard of, you would have studied the concept of rules. Now every act which is passed whether by parliament or by the state will have, usually will have this expression as may be prescribed, as may be prescribed. That means that the procedure will be stated in a subsequent rule which will be framed. Now by and large, when we frame a law, the intent of not hardwiring anything, if you want the maximum flexibility, then you make a very simple law. All of you one day will have to frame a law or draft a law. So one extreme example would be make the law very simple, and every article or every rule, each act will have, everything will mention, this expression as may be prescribed, every line. So that's where you have a somewhat of a bad intention, because you want to make that completely flexible. In other words, the legislative powers are being reduced and administrative powers are going up. Article 166 talks about conduct of business of the government of a state, and it says that all executive action will be taken in the name of governor, similar to the government of India, where everything is, the president is pleased to remove you from service, is equally pleased to appoint you in service. So similarly here it's in the name of the governor, and it is the governor who will make rules for transaction of business of the government of the state. And similarly, Article 167 says it's also the duty of the Chief Minister of the state to communicate to the governor all the cabinet decisions and proposals for legislation. So before any proposal goes to the assembly for a new act, it has to go up to the governor, get his approval, and because we had to do that as the chief secretary, I had to do that. And similarly, the cabinet, the chief secretary of a state is also the cabinet secretary. So the chief secretary sits next to the chief minister during the cabinet meetings, and thereafter the cabinet meeting, the decisions go out to the governor. Okay, now we'll come to another point, which is, many of you know this, that there was an amendment in the constitution some years back, and really in response to instability in certain states where everyone elected wanted to be a minister. So they laid down a condition that the total number of ministers in a council of ministers cannot exceed 15% of the total MLAs in the assembly. So in our state we have 294 MLAs, therefore the total number of ministers we can have is 44. You have constitutional bodies, as I have already mentioned. For example, the State Public Service Commission, State Election Commission. These are the two constitutional bodies, other than the governor, Chief Justice, Chief Minister, all that, leaving that aside. You have these two commissions which are constitutionally set up. Then you have tribunals which have been set up, like West Bengal Administrative Tribunal, which is, you have a similar body which is popularly known as CAT, Central Administrative Tribunal. We come under Central Administrative Tribunal. But the officers or staff of the state, when they appeal against any wrong that they feel has been done, they'll have to go to the West Bengal Administrative Tribunal. Then you have the West Bengal Land Reforms Tenancy Tribunal, where appeals go starting right from the revenue officer at the BLLRO level, DLLRO level, final appeal before going to the High Court. It goes to the West Bengal Land Reforms Tenancy Tribunal, and you have the Taxation Tribunal. Then you have statutory bodies. The statutory body means a body formed from a statute, that is a law. So any organization which has been set up under a law is a statutory body. So we have a long list: West Bengal Human Rights Commission, West Bengal Commission for Women, West Bengal Commission for Protection of Child Rights, the Lokayukt, West Bengal Information Commission, which is what I am heading at the moment, West Bengal Right to Public Service Commission, West Bengal State Food Commission, College Service Commission, Madrasa Service Commission, Central School Service Commission, Cooperative, the whole list. Then you have organizations set up by notification, just a notification. West Bengal Group D Recruitment Board, set up by a notification of the government. West Bengal Police Recruitment Board, State Vigilance Commission, Anti-Corruption Branch of West Bengal. All these have been set up simply by a notification, which of course has happened after a cabinet meeting, cabinet decision and a notification. And finally, we have what are known as state public service, public undertakings and corporations. If you look at public policies, as I said, when any government is elected to power, it comes up with policies and it wants to show itself as different from the previous dispensation. So it could be a manifesto implementation, it could be ideological belief, it could be court judgment sometimes. Then you have lobbyists who work, industrial lobbies or other lobbies which work. There is often a, allegation of quid pro quo, some government coming and helping somebody for some quid pro quo. Then some strong leaders often take very strong decisions which are often quite wrong. And usually that is a trend which is happening in the center, in the states, many states. You do have, we often have a very important role to play at the top when we are working with a chief minister, and if I think that the chief minister is making a wrong decision, it is my job not to, not to stop myself and actually argue with her or him. But that sometimes doesn't happen, and sometimes it's beyond your capacity, it goes beyond you. But there is, the main area where you will have to remain very immune to outside influence is where you have a statutory duty. After all, let's say 144 order, no politician has any right to tell you that, impose 144. Because you are at that point of time doing your statutory duty. So it's your decision which is important. Okay, so I'll end here really. I have just got another couple of slides, but I'll I'll just mention a few things. West Bengal is a place where there are a lot of argumentative Bengalis or argumentative Indians, extension of that. We do a lot of consultation and debate. So it's very difficult here to impose your views or have, your behavior is very important here. So the way you come across, feudalism doesn't exist here. You have to take people along. The state civil service here is highly talented. I must say this. It's one of the best civil services because one has had the opportunity of interacting with in other states. I worked at the center as well. So the state civil service here is highly talented. Bengali is still not used that much in administrative work, but that is likely to change. But it's very important for all of you who are coming from outside Bengal to at least pick up spoken Bengali quickly because it does help a lot. And much of what you will be, you'll be regarded as somebody who's taken some trouble if you can speak to a person in his local language. And it's not true that people in Bengal understand Hindi. They don't in the villages. In the cities perhaps, but not so much in the villages. So the vast majority of people in our state will not able to understand Hindi that well. Another thing where I'll end with this, we don't have any outsider bias in our state. And this is not just now. We have a chief secretary and a home secretary, none of whom are insiders to the state. There were options, but so there is no insider-outsider issue. This is a great advantage for any of you who are coming in from other states, that this is a state where outsider-insider issues are not there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.